Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever noticed how people who do nothing extraordinary are never criticized? Have you ever met a statue that was ridiculed for the way it stood? But the moment you move, the moment you create, the moment you dare to exist outside the lines, voices will rise. Some will cheer, but others, oh, they will resent you. Why? Because you remind them of what they fear in themselves. You are a reflection of the courage they refuse to embrace. And so they criticize not because you are wrong, but because they are afraid. And so, my dear listener, if you stop, if you let their words shrink your existence, you do not silence them. You only silence yourself. And that, my friend, is the greatest tragedy. You see, we have been conditioned to believe that the opinions of others define our worth. From childhood, we are taught to seek approval, to be good, to fit in. And yet, every truly free being in history, every artist, every thinker, every revolutionary, was called a fool, a dreamer, a failure, until they weren't. So what do you do when they come for you? Do you shrink? Do you shape yourself into what they find acceptable? No, you smile. You listen, and then you let it pass, like the wind through an open field. Because to be free, truly free, is to walk through the fire of judgment and remain untouched. It is to laugh at the absurdity of those who shout from the sidelines but never dare to step into the arena themselves. Haters are nothing but the echoes of minds trapped in fear. And fear, my friend, is not your master. So, I ask you, will you live for their voices or for your own? Will you bend or will you dance? The choice is yours. But remember this, the world has never been changed by those who whispered in agreement. It has only ever been moved by those who ignored the noise and walked their own path. And that, my dear listener, is the only path worth walking. The illusion of criticism is one of the greatest deceptions we face in life. We are taught from an early age to seek validation, to measure our worth by how others perceive us. But what if I told you that criticism is really about you? What if the words thrown your way, whether they praise or condemn, are nothing more than reflections of the person speaking them? Consider the critic who constantly finds fault in others. Do they do this because they are wise? Because they hold some sacred truth that you are blind to? No. They do it because they themselves are trapped in a prison of insecurity. They speak not from enlightenment, but from their own fears, their own frustrations, their own inability to create or risk or dare. When they see someone bold enough to step beyond the lines, to express themselves freely, they feel threatened, they feel exposed. And so they lash out, not as an act of wisdom, but as an unconscious defense mechanism. And yet, we take these words to heart, we let them shape us, we let the fear of judgment shrink our existence. But here's the truth. Criticism is an illusion because it can never define you. A person who lives cautiously to avoid judgment will still be judged. A person who hides will still be spoken of. The voices will always exist, and they will shift like the wind, contradicting themselves, attaching their opinions to their own fleeting emotions. But you are not made of such fragile substance. The only reality that exists is the one you choose to live in. When you recognize that criticism is merely the noise of others wrestling with themselves, you stop letting it direct your path. Freedom from approval is the most radical liberation a person can experience. From the moment we are born, we are conditioned to seek permission. Permission to be, permission to express, permission to exist as we truly are. This craving for approval becomes so deeply ingrained that we often mistake it for purpose. We measure our success, our beauty, our intelligence, and even our worth based on how others perceive us. But here's the paradox. No matter how much approval you gather, it will never be enough. The moment you meet one person's expectations, another will disagree. The moment you fit into one mold, society will create a new one. You chase a finish line that constantly moves, running toward a mirage that vanishes the moment you think you've arrived. And so the deeper you fall into this illusion, the more enslaved you become. But what if you stopped running? Or what if you let go of the exhausting pursuit of validation and simply existed as you are? It may sound terrifying at first because we have been led to believe that our worth is something external, something given to us by others. But the truth is, you were whole before the world told you otherwise. You were enough before anyone had the chance to approve or disapprove of you. When you stop living for the applause and start living for the experience itself, you step into true freedom. The opinions of others lose their grip, and suddenly life becomes a playground, a space for expression, rather than a test to be passed. In that moment, you reclaim yourself. You become untouchable, not because no one will judge you, but because their judgment will no longer matter. Life is not a battle to be won against critics. It is a dance to be danced with absolute abandon. Yet most people live as if they are standing on a stage, waiting for applause, terrified of being laughed at. They hesitate, overthink, shrink themselves into acceptable forms, and in doing so they miss the music. They forget that the purpose of life is not to be admired, but to be lived. The most vibrant, alive, and magnetic people are not those who strive to please everyone. They are the ones who move freely, who express without hesitation, who let life flow through them without needing permission. And that terrifies those who are still trapped. That is why they judge. They are not angry at you for dancing. They are angry at themselves for being too afraid to join. But their fear is not your burden to carry. If you stop moving because of them, you are not protecting yourself, you are imprisoning yourself. Do you think the sun dims its light because someone finds it too bright? Do you think the river stops flowing because someone is annoyed by the sound? No. The sun shines because it is the sun. The river flows because it is the river. And you must live because you are alive. The world will always have its spectators, its critics, its doubters. Let them watch, let them talk, let them do whatever they must to protect themselves from their own fears. But you, do not hesitate, do not stand still, dance boldly, love loudly, speak fearlessly, and laugh without restraint. Because life is too short, too wild, and too fleeting to be lived for the approval of those too afraid to live it themselves. The nature of haters is simple. They are not reacting to you, but to something within themselves. They see you moving forward, expressing freely, daring to be something they have denied in themselves, and it unsettles them. Not because you are wrong, not because you are flawed, but because you are a mirror reflecting back to them the life they could have lived if only they had been brave enough. Every insult, every piece of unsolicited criticism, every attempt to diminish you is not a revelation of your shortcomings, but an admission of their own. Haters do not hate you. They hate the discomfort you cause in them. They hate the fact that your presence challenges the small, safe world they have built for themselves. But here's the trick. Their words only have power if you accept them. If you react, if you shrink, if you try to explain yourself, you validate their illusion. And so the greatest response is not anger, not retaliation, but indifference. You must see their words as they truly are, noise, echoes of unresolved battles they fight within themselves. When you realize this, you stop seeing them as enemies and start seeing them as lost travelers shouting at the horizon because they are too afraid to walk toward it. The tragedy is not that haters exist. The tragedy is that so many people listen to them. They take the words of the fearful and let them define what is possible. But possibility is not dictated by those who are afraid. It is shaped by those who are willing to ignore the noise and keep moving. If you understand this, their words will no longer touch you. You will let them speak, and you will keep walking. Transcending negativity is not about avoiding it, but about transforming it. The world is filled with voices, some lifting, some tearing down, some indifferent. To exist is to be seen, and to be seen is to invite both admiration and opposition. But what most people fail to realize is that negativity only has power when you absorb it, when you internalize it as truth. The moment you decide that negativity is fuel rather than a force to fear, you shift from being affected to being untouchable. Imagine fire. It does not complain about the wind, it consumes it, grows stronger because of it. This is how you must treat the negativity that comes your way. When people criticize, when they mock, when they try to pull you down, they are unknowingly giving you energy. They are handing you the very force they wish to use against you, and in that moment you have a choice. You can let it break you, or you can let it build you. Some of the greatest creations in history were born out of rejection, doubt, and criticism. Every person who ever did something worth remembering was once told they were wrong, foolish, incapable. The difference between them and the ones who faded into silence is that they did not accept those words as final. Instead, they took the negativity and shaped it into momentum. They let it sharpen their focus, refine their passion, and fuel their journey. Negativity will always exist. The question is, will you let it weaken you, or will you use it to rise? Because once you learn to transform it, once you see it as the wind beneath your fire, you will understand the great secret. No one can stop you but you. The power of presence is the ultimate freedom from external judgment. Most people live trapped in a world of echoes, haunted by past criticism, anxious about future opinions, always measuring themselves against an invisible standard set by others. They exist everywhere except in the only place that truly matters, the present moment. And yet, when you are fully here, when your mind is not drifting between the past and future, but completely immersed in what is happening now, there is no space for fear, no room for doubt, no audience in your mind casting judgment over your every move. Think of a child lost in play, laughing without concern, dancing without wondering who is watching. They are not thinking, do I look foolish, or what will they say? They are simply being. This is the state we were meant to live in before we were taught to filter ourselves, before we learned to shrink for approval. And the irony? The people who live in presence, who move through life with authenticity and without hesitation, are the ones who command the most respect, the ones who radiate a kind of untouchable confidence. It is not that they are never judged, but that they are too present to care. When you are fully in the now, haters lose their power over you. Their words may still exist, but they will no longer reach you because you will be too engaged with life itself to notice. You will be too busy creating, too busy feeling, too busy experiencing the depth of each moment. And when you do that, something magical happens. The world no longer dictates who you are. You become free, not because the critics disappear, but because you no longer hear them over the sound of your own existence. So I ask you, what will you choose? Will you live at the mercy of voices that do not know you, opinions that shift like the wind, judgments that were never about you to begin with? Or will you rise above, move beyond, and step fully into the life that is waiting for you? But the truth is, haters will always exist, but their words are powerless unless you grant them meaning. You do not need their approval, nor do you need their understanding. The only thing you need is the courage to keep going, to keep creating, to keep being exactly who you are without apology. Because in the end, the ones who make a difference, the ones who live fully, the ones who leave a mark on this world, are never the ones who bow to the critics. They are the ones who walk forward, undistracted, unshaken, and entirely free.